Not long ago, it was the circuits of Monaco and Monza that epitomized Formula One. Its modern ambition? Well, it's more Miami.
It's the first ever Miami Grand Prix.
The competition's newest race signaled evolution at the pinnacle of auto racing. Fast cars, big money, drama. It all sounds pretty American, right? Well, for decades, the sport just hasn't landed with US fans.
But that finally looks to have changed. This year, not only will the US have more races than any other country, but with Las Vegas joining the circuit, the balance of power in F1 might be shifting across the Atlantic. It's all part of F1's ownership's bet to capture the most elusive and wealthy market.
We decided to find out for ourselves what makes F1 such an exciting sport.
Oh, and to see if an injection of American fans will be enough to save a sport whose growth not long ago had started to stall.
So, Jason Kelly, I know you're Irish, and I know it was just St. Patrick's Day, but why have you brought me here?
Well, always a good excuse to have a pint, of course, but we're here because of Formula One. This is the beating heart in Manhattan of F1 racing. Let's go inside. Hey,
Hiya.
How are you? How's it going? You're
Good.
very welcome. So nice to
Hey,
meet you
Kevin.
guys.
Yeah, thank
Very
you so
good.
much.
2 days after St. Patrick's Day, your bar is filled again. What's the occasion?
Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, especially the time of the race. It's tonight there, 1 p.m. here. As you say, we're filling up pretty early. It's already not even an hour to the race.
So what is the vibe?
It's a party. It's an absolute party. It's friendly rivalry, friendly ribbing, and they all have a great time.
Tell us about sort of the customer who is drawn to this sport.
Like the last few years, the rise amongst females is incredible. I'd say, like you can see by the crowd later today, we have more women watching this than men at the moment, which is fantastic to see. They have their laptops with the diagnostics for the engines and stuff on them. It's incredible.
I mean, worst ways to spend a Sunday afternoon.
Definitely not a bad one.
It's a lot of fun. It's very electric. If someone's getting like a great pit stop or there's a good overtake, even if you don't like the team, everyone's cheering for it.
So were you a sports fan before and this is your new sport?
This is my new sport, yeah. I normally followed like basketball, football, but now Formula One is my bread and butter. I don't watch any other sports. I don't have time for it. I only watch Formula One.
Tell me about this line. Is it normal?
It's normal for afternoon race. A lot of F1 fans in New York.
When it's not the afternoon, when it's the middle of the night, there's still a lot of people here?
Yes, true fans come in day and night, rain, shine, snow.
Why is it so interesting to you as women?
I think that's one of the things that we all really love about this sport is that there are so many new fans who are women.
It's really exciting seeing a lot of drivers of color, and I think I've noticed too, like a lot of fans of color are now starting to come out more.
It's a sport that more accurately represents the fabric that makes up America in terms of the drivers of color and the diversity of languages that are spoken on the track. Like that's actually a very American thing that is not reflected in American-based sports.
I've never seen a race. This is my first time ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even better. So why are you here?
It seems like a giant party, and it just seems like a lot of fun, and I can't wait.
Yeah.
That's as much as I can contribute.
Despite the enthusiasm of the fans here in Fele Bar, history tells us they might want to exercise some caution. Formula One in the US isn't exactly a new thing. Races have been held here since the 1950s, and in 12 different host cities, many of which tried, but failed to make a mark. There was a Vegas race back in 1981, where the track was built in Caesar's Palace parking lot. Very glamorous. There was Phoenix in 1989.
And the track is 155 degrees Fahrenheit, but of course...
The heat meant only 6 cars finished. And in 2005, a dispute over tires at the Indianapolis Speedway saw 14 of 20 cars boycott the race, which didn't sit well with a crowd of more than 100,000.
We ask you to not throw debris on the course.
Historically in the US, F1 has never really been popular since its sort of inception in the 1970s until even Mario Andretti, the first American, had won a championship in 1978. Since then, it really hasn't been that popular, despite Americans broadly loving motorsports.
Even having an American champion wasn't enough to solidify a fan base in the 70s. And don't forget, F1 has always had to contend with NASCAR and Indy, racing competitions with almost purely American followings.
Formula One always seemed this overseas, international, sort of European posh sport that never quite captivated American audiences. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first being that F1 never quite invested that much in American tracks and American Grand Prix. The second reason, broadly speaking, is that Bernie Ecclestone, who had led F1 for many decades, saw this as much more of an upscale sport.
Bernie Ecclestone, the British magnate at the helm of F1 for so long, was seen as the man who both built F1 into what it is today, but also held it back.
He had a famous quote that said he wanted to manage F1 like a Michelin restaurant and not a hamburger joint. He described it to me as sort of a glamorous champagne event at some point, and that was not something that was really accessible in American audiences, who viewed it sort of as a more pretentious version of NASCAR.
F1's largest stakeholder, CBC, began pushing for growth in digital and in the US, but found itself challenged by Ecclestone.
Under Bernie, the joke was that he used to send Lewis Hamilton, the lead driver for Mercedes, cease and desist letters just for posting a clip of F1 on Instagram.
That would all change in 2017.
Liberty Media has agreed to buy the company that controls Formula One racing.
After 40 years running the sport, Ecclestone is no longer chief executive. He's been replaced by...
US media giant Liberty quickly got to work on transforming the sport, and an American audience was front and center of that strategy.
When Liberty came in, they really did see this as a very extremely undervalued asset. They loosened restrictions about clip sharing, so people could share clips on YouTube easily. They invested a lot more in video games. Another thing that they really wanted to invest in was digital streaming. What they saw in F1 was sort of a very unique global brand audience that hadn't been mined enough. They saw this opportunity to sort of buy a global sport, much in the same way as we'd equate with FIFA or the Olympics, something that you can't really buy these days. And they also struck a big deal with Netflix for a show called Drive to Survive.
How did you get into F1?
Drive to Survive.
Drive to Survive is why I became a big fan.
Roman's crash in Bahrain, I mean, it was a moment that it sort of time stopped for a little bit. You just see an explosion of flames. And honestly, your initial instinct is that there's no way anyone's walking out of that.
Paul Martin is the co-founder of Box to Box Films. They're the crack team behind award winners such as Senna and Amy, and more recently, the Netflix hit show Drive to Survive.
It is a new dawn.
What we tried to do was just to make people fall in love with the drivers.
This is not going in Drive to Survive.
We humanized them a bit more where, you know, the sport hadn't. You know, the sport had just, oh, there's these guys in the car, but don't worry about them. Look how fast the cars are. Where we were like, no, look at these kids that are 19, 20 years old and doing extraordinary things in race cars. Where we really realized that we had something, and we had something that people hadn't seen before, was a really sort of a hot moment. It was like Gunter, you know, in Australia in kind of season 1, and the front wheels on both his cars have fallen off. You know, he gets on the phone to Gene Haas and says, look,
Gene, we finished 4th and 5th here. You look like rock stars, huh? And now we are a bunch of
and you're just like, oh, that's just gold. And it was funny to, to people go like, oh my God, you discovered this guy Gunter. And you're like, he's been in that garage for the last 20 years. It's like just nobody thought that there was any value in kind of talking to him and talking about the back of the grid versus kind of the top of the grid. It was well publicised that Mercedes and Ferrari didn't take part in season 1. Was probably actually worked better for the show because it made us work a little bit harder to go and find those other characters, to go and find those other stories.
Shows like Drive to Survive have existed before. We all love behind-the-scenes TV shows. What was different about Drive to Survive is that you were coming after an audience that had essentially never really watched F1. There was a lot of sort of suspense in this documentary that I think helped it grow among US audiences because they had been introduced to the sport by this documentary itself.
Made in partnership with F1, the show was and continues to be a huge success. 3 years after launch, ESPN's live race day ratings have nearly doubled. And according to Nielsen, the sport added 73 million new fans from 2020 to 2021, many of those driven by Netflix.
I think what you realize is, American sports fans, when they go in, they go all in. Miami last year was crazy.
And if you're Shaquille O'Neal, then there is only one way to travel.
The 2022 Miami GP was a turning point in more ways than one. The fake marina and drivers wearing football helmets probably wouldn't have been Bernie Ecclestone's cup of tea. But interest in F1 in the US was at an all-time high that weekend, according to Google Trends. This year's new race in Vegas could really cement F1's place in the US. If successful, it could change the balance of power in F1 away from Europe and toward the Americas.
It wasn't until recently that we at Liberty Media had the opportunity to really take Formula One to the next level in the United States through the explosion of popularity from Netflix, as well as just, Americans beginning to embrace the sport more and more. Younger demographic, more female demographic. The timing was absolutely right.
F1 threw a launch party a year out from this season's inaugural Vegas race to hype it up even more.
It's incredible. The amount of support we get from the US is probably bigger than anywhere.
The race is in a year. The amount of people which are here already for this, for me it's like, wow, this is crazy, guys. I just go out there and it seems like to be almost at a race, with all the fans around here.
It's every single race we go to at the moment, there's record-breaking numbers of fans who are going, and especially in the US, they're sort of knocking it out of the park. So really excited to see what Formula One can do with Vegas next year.
We welcome the Formula One President and CEO, Stefano Domenicali.
What is so interesting about Vegas, beyond the idea of cars flying down the strip at 200 miles an hour, is that Liberty is also the promoter of the race, something never seen before during their tenure in F1. The race will run through closed city streets at night, not in Caesars parking lot like back in the 80s. Liberty has spent $240 million on essential construction to augment the course.
We took the decision to go for it, to invest, buying a property here. We're going to build the garage, the structure, because that is the perfect combination of trying to maximize an opportunity that could be unique with a situation that doesn't know exactly what it is Formula One. Because here in Vegas, you have every day in the different resort, different events. But this will be the unique event where everyone will live around us. So it's a great opportunity.
And so how much does Vegas, pardon the pun, accelerate the ambition in the US?
We have to recognize that a couple of years ago, when we were just in Austin, we were having the doubt. Let's invest again, we need to stay there. And then when we took the decision, which I do believe, and we do believe were the right thing, to try to be much more inclusive in offering our content, our platform through social media, through a new experience like Netflix. We were engaged with the American fans, and we saw already this year in Miami, it was phenomenal. And we said, okay, now it's time to think bigger, and that's why we took the decision to come to Vegas.
The Vegas race will be the penultimate event in the competition's calendar, which could make it stand out even more. Liberty's approach to reaching new fans has been critical. Not only has US TV viewership increased, up 36% in 2022 compared to 2021, but their online following is up too. In the US, social follows were up 42% in 2022 year over year.
Formula One is the most exciting sport on the planet.
From explaining a complex sport to a new audience,
it might seem like an individual pursuit, but F1 is a team sport.
To building bigger fan bases for their drivers,
the Buffalo Bills or Buffalo Wings.
Oh, they're both such good things.
Liberty's focus on digital is very different from the strategy of the previous management.
I don't know what to say.
Growing that American audience means a likely increased interest from US brands, too. Ford will join forces with world champion Red Bull in 2026, and General Motors is trying to join the grid by partnering with Andretti Global under its Cadillac banner. So the US has the fans and the most racetracks in this year's competition. It just needs one more special ingredient.
F1 welcoming the first American driver, Logan Sargent, to the grid since 2015.
Back in February, I caught up with Logan Sargent, the first American driver in F1 since 2015. This was before he'd ever been in this season's car. All right, Logan, tell me about your journey that's gotten you to F1. I mean, you started and you came here really young. Tell me about that journey from America to here.
It's a pretty interesting one. To be honest, I feel like when I started karting in America, it was really just like it was a really fun hobby that I could do with my brother and my dad, and just sort of go out on the weekends with the friends. And then we moved to Europe at 12. We really just want to get to the most competitive karting scene there was, which was in Europe.
So back then, when you were only 10 years old, who was watching, and how did you even know it was a thing?
Well, I originally grew up watching NASCAR for the most part, and Jeff Gordon was my #1 driver back in the day. But just from my dad, he was really watching sort of between NASCAR, IndyCar, and F1. And I'd say it's really because of him I started watching F1 and really knew what the sport was.
And now there's 3 races in the US. How do you feel like you're going to feel when you go back and you're in the States for those?
I think it's going to be a special feeling to race at home. I feel like, in America, we're able to produce such a great atmosphere. And I mean, that combined with having friends and family there. And there's always something just special about even just walking and being on your home soil. Hopefully I'm able to give the crowd someone to cheer for. And, I can be the American driver that we've been waiting for.
The Williams team gave Logan a contract because he's a talented driver, but there's also plenty of narrative here too.
Logan's, ended up Williams, and I think for us making the show, I think it's a really interesting perspective because I think they also see the commercial upside of having an American driver and the only American driver, in the paddock. And I think that for us and in Drive to Survive is a really interesting story to watch unfold this year.
So, watching the sport is fun, but I wanted to get closer. Obviously, none of the current teams were that keen to lend me one of their cars, so I found this beauty.
It's an EJ12, chassis number 1. It's from 2002, and it's Takuma Sato's ex-race-driven car.
What's the difference between this F1 car and the ones that are on the track today?
So this configuration, we still have a 3-pedal configuration, how to pull away. The modern Formula 1 cars, everything's on the hand clutch. So modern Formula 1 cars only have a throttle and a brake, and this thing is tiny compared to the new ones. This thing's about 12.5 feet long, modern ones now are touching 16 feet, and they're just so much wider.
So when we get into this, how different is it going to feel than a regular car?
So this thing has a power to weight ratio of pretty much 1-to-1, so 1 horsepower per 1 kilogram of weight, which makes this thing handle like a dream and also just drive so fast.
That was a really crazy experience, but I only got up to about 60. I really don't know how they get over 200. Taking those turns at that speed is really scary.
Back in New York City, we paid a visit to Manhattan's Classic Car Club. Founder Phil Kavanaugh has seen the growth of F1 from both sides of the pond.
What is it about sort of car culture and racing culture that is so dramatic and appealing? You know cars as well as anyone.
If you talk to anyone about their car culture or car experience, they'll probably tell you about their dad's Chevy or their granddad's car. There is an experience. You sit in them and they give you some excitement. And that kind of the ultimate excitement is F1. Wouldn't we all love to be an F1 driver? Just for one race. Wouldn't I love that?
What do you think having an American driver is going to do for the sport here?
I think it's going to be huge. I think we all want a hero, don't we? I think the next step is to get 2, 3, 4 American drivers and hopefully a female American driver. I think it's great for the sport. It's a new story.
So not only do your members get to watch the races, but you actually have a simulator here.
Yep, we have our own sim room. You can literally relive the race at Classic Car Club. And it's a visceral experience.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, shit.
I died.
I am not going very fast.
This is hard.
I am driving like a grandma, but I am on the track.
For the record, I was much better at actually driving a real car.
I'm just trying to stay on the track. I mean, these guys are obviously like winning and losing on tenths of a second.
I don't understand how they take some of these turns.
Boom. I'm winning this like I've never won anything before.
Eesh.
In part because I keep hearing her crash. Vanessa, in a lot of ways, all roads lead to Vegas, at least this year in Formula One, and certainly it's the race that everyone is talking about.
It'll be interesting to see how that sets up the racing in the US, if it goes beyond that, or if that just becomes the biggest race on the circuit.
And while Liberty Media's buyout came with a reasonable portion of risk, that bet already looks to have paid off.
Just recently, it was reported by Bloomberg that the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund was trying to take over Liberty Media, their Formula One asset, for $20 billion, which would represent a massive return on their investment, given that I think they spent $4.4 billion on the sport just a few years ago. They really think there's massive growth to be had here, and you're seeing it in ticket sales. In 2021, the Texas race had a record attendance of 400,000. And then the following year, in 2022, they eclipsed that and have 440,000 people attending.
When you think about the expansion into the US, obviously it's about growing the fan base, but growing the fan base means growing the value of this investment for Liberty Media. Keep in mind, the biggest races now on the circuit, at least the 3 of the top 5, are happening in the US. And so if they keep going deeper into this market, that's just more fans and more money.